meant to, run in a single loop, which means if you have this, let's assume we have multiple processes, and you have multiple, processes or multiple execution that you have, done, maybe like functions trying to run and perform different operations. The idea is they have to enter, this kind of like a queue, right? And they have to be executed one after the other. So this is just like an illustration, right? They have to be executed one after the other. So I'm also going to assume we have like a point where this execution has to end, right? So let's say this item has to be executed just like this. So it moves, it gets, it executes, and then it leaves, right? So that's just the example. The next item would have to come in, move, and then also like, exit the queue. Okay, so the thing is, this is basically how a lot of programs work. I mean, even in Python, in JavaScript, and so let's say, though there's a feature that is also, implemented, which is basically like, an asynchronous feature for running multiple items on a single thread. It just, works. I would say it's just the execution mode, right? So Node is actually non-blocking, which means if you're executing a current program and you also run another program, when it gets to this particular program, what happens is it's non-blocking, so which means it can actually continue execution. So if maybe this particular item, if maybe this item was depending on this item, let's assume this is item A, this is B. So let's do this again so you understand this. So I'm going to bring this back here. And also bring this back here. Take this off. So let's assume this is item A, right? Item A starts execution, and item B needs some sort of data returned from item A before it can, before it should be executed. And maybe something goes wrong. This item is a little bit delayed, or maybe you have like a buggy code or a faulty code, and this other item starts running already without receiving any feedback or any return value from this. Node actually is non-blocking, which means it can proceed with its execution. And at the end of the day, you might end up having like a buggy result. So that's why we have an idea of what we call async operations, async IO, which is basically trying to implement a layer of concurrency on this. Now we've not gotten to that. We're definitely going to talk about concurrency. I'm going to diagrammatically explain that to you as well and tell you when things should probably be synchronous and also asynchronous. So we'll talk about that, and don't find this confusing in any way. So let's minimize this and let's proceed. So the same idea, is wrapped around the concept of the repo, and of course, what does the repo stand for? So I'm going to do a bit of let's use this. So repo basically means this is repo, and I hope you can see this. I'll zoom in again. Okay, so read. Okay, so read executes print loop. When talking about the repo, there are lots of things I think you also need to understand about the repo. So based on what I explained, it's almost the same process. But I think maybe I should also, break this down. So read executes print loop, or I think people also call this evaluate, right? Yeah. So read evaluate print loop. And what happens is it gives you like a prompt, right? It gives you like a prompt, which is basically what you always see when you type in Node on your terminal. And, what happens is using this prompt, you are meant to put in like something to be executed, right? It's a prompt asking you to put in something, which means it's about to read the command, right? The command you're putting in there is about to read that command. So maybe we can do like 10 plus 10. So what happens is, the Node engine grabs this item and then moves it to, so this is the read, and then the Node engine grabs this and then evaluates this. Right? And then gives you, which is the print now, gives you, so this is evaluates. So just probably stay at this point, right? Then this is, the next thing should be to print, which is probably 20. So here's the print stage. And then finally, it gives you another prompt, which means it did not kick you out of the prompt, of course. It just gave you the next prompt, which is the loop, right? So when you say something is looping, it means you're just going, round and round until you decide to quit that particular loop. So basically, that's what you get, right? So I can just say loop. So what happens is it reads, evaluates, or execute. I love to call it execute. I don't think that's a wrong. I don't think that's a wrong description. It's basically the same thing. So when executing this item, it also performs the evaluation, right? And it gives you the results, and then it prints this, and then finally it comes back to that loop, right? It's a continuous loop, and then you can issue another command. So at this point, it's asking you to issue another command. All right. So I believe that is something you should understand from these steps. I'm going to drop this in the chat just in case you might need it. Doing that now. Okay, great. All right, so we have that in the chat. I'm sure this is the right room. Yeah, so we have that in the chat, and I can take this off. All right, so why do we need the repo in the first place? So basically for doing like, quick checks, quick, execution. Once again, I believe you've installed Node, and just in case you don't know how to install Node, come down to the Node official website and download Node from here. This is the easiest way. Just click on this, and as you can see, it's asking me to install just 53 MB on my Mac. There are some other ways you can install using your terminal. We're not going to talk about that here. I don't think there's a point for that, but you can just quickly check out how to install a Node with Brew. Homebrew, right? Or maybe some other tools, maybe trying to install it from GitHub or something. But this is the standard. Just go ahead and click this on your Windows system. Let me pause this download. Yeah. So on your Windows machine, of course, once you start the download, all you have to do is once you're done with the download, all you have to do is double click on it, and of course, it will give you like the normal basic installation prompt. Follow the wizard until you complete that installation. Okay, so back to the repo. Since we have explained the repo, let's do some tests, right? I'm going to open another terminal here, just for backup, in case there are some things I want to show you. Now we can just do something like 10 plus 10. Let's see, we have 20, 20 plus 20. These are basic maths, right? 20 times 2. So as you can see, we are putting in the input, we're getting the results. We can also perform something such as console.log, hello, right? That's to be a string. Okay, as you can see, we have hello world. You can do console.table. Maybe we're putting in some sort of objects, right? So we can have like a username, admin, also as a string, right? Password, admin. Oh, okay, so there was a mistake there. I have to correct it. All right, so you see, there was a mistake here because I did not close the string, but closed it here. And as you can see, you can do some, use some kind of, commands, not just console.table. You can actually even go ahead to define a function here, but we're not going to bother ourselves with that. But it's not a big deal, right? So you can do things like, console UID equals require, we can require files, right? We can require like, libraries of plugins, UUID, and then, we have UUID required right now. We can do object.keys. So just in case you don't know what this is, object.keys, I would advise you try to master, how to use object.keys, or even, I think the second one is console.dir. So if you have like a library or a plugin installed, you can actually see like the basic methods, right? So which is basically what I'm doing. JavaScript, everything is an object, and now you see that each of these methods are also like described as objects, right? So I can also do something like console.dir UUID. I think basically I should get the same thing with different like pattern of displaying this item. So these items are getters, which means they are meant to serve you something. So maybe we'll do like the v4. We can do console.log uuid.v4, and we can definitely, this is a method, right? So you see we have like a UUID here, right? You can do like appending items. So remember, we already have like a UUID required at the top, which means it's still part of our repo at the moment. So we can do something like maybe like string concat. So I can say let response equals we can do this. We can say this is a simple UUID, and we have this. Right, I put in this item UUID.v4. We have to console.log response. Okay, so this is a simple UUID with our UUID. So what we are using here now is just we required UUID, and just in case you don't know this just yet, I will show you how to do this. And the idea is we're using a library that is not local, which is not necessarily part of Node, right? It's not part of the Node engine. It was installed, and in order to install this, that's why I have the second terminal open. So you can also try this. UUID is basically a library for generating random IDs, right? And the random IDs are going to be very unique. So we can just check it out, UUID NPM. This leads us to another topic, which is NPM, which I'm going to also explain. Everything we're talking about is still under the concept of utilizing Node, right? We're still going to talk more in the future because we definitely have like a bunch of things to say about last week's session as well. But just so you have like heads up on what we're going to cover, at least from now, maybe for the next 1 hour, 30 minutes. This is NPM. Basically, what happens on NPM, it's a place where libraries are stored, right? So developers build amazing libraries, and they store it here so that other developers can also make use of it. And we have a bunch of package managers in different programming languages. So ranging from JavaScript, Node, down to Python, down to Ruby, down to even Microsoft C#. Most languages, I won't say every, because I'm not very certain about that, but most of the languages I've used in the past, and even those I've not used but I've heard of, have package managers, right? So NPM is what you definitely use for Node, except maybe something new comes up tomorrow, right? So when you get to the official NPM website, which is npmjs.com, drop it on the chat. So there's a link on the chat. What you have to do is just type in the plugin you're looking for. If so UUID, you can go for a random string. There are so many of them. We'll definitely use some of these. So let's proceed with UUID search. And the idea is when this comes out, it searches for a bunch of things that have the tag UUID, and it's showing you different ways to probably rate these plugins. By the optimality, by popularity, the quality, and also the level of maintenance. So as you can see, every library has this level of, should I say, quality checks. So popularity, quality, and maintenance. This is not highly maintained, but this is a very reasonable level of maintenance. Very reasonable level, 33%, and popularity, of course, as you can see, is 91%. So basically, when it comes to maintenance, the question you should ask yourself is why is this not filled up down to the end? So for me personally, I think maintenance has to do with what the library does, and the technicality behind it, and the requirements from the community, what people want it to do, or maybe there are some bugs they need to fix. But for something like this, which is a very basic and simple library, I think it's quite understandable why the maintenance level is at 33%. I must actually commend the developers behind that behind this beautiful library. Okay, so now we are on the page UID, and it gives you a way to install this. It also gives you a bunch of descriptions you can read through and also see how to use this library, right? You see npm install UID, import v4 as a UID v4 with this open and close braces. It means they are actually describing the internal content, right? The internal content of this library, trying to grab something directly instead of calling UUID dot, dot v4. They can just call UUID v4, or maybe you can just say import v4 from UUID, and you can just call v4 directly. So I think maybe I could also show you this. Let's start with, you just have to click on this and then open up the terminal to install. So I just pasted this here, npm I or npm install. Very, the same thing, similar. It's just like a short form, right? UUID, and you would have this installed on your machine. If you have a problem with installation, there are so many errors you might get. And, most times you have to be aware that most of these installation errors are due to permissions. Maybe you don't have the permission to install in that particular directory. So maybe you're not the administrator, or you don't have, basically you don't have sufficient permission. So you have to look for a way to fix your permission issues. You can do some Google search based on the error you get, or you can also ask questions here in the chat. Okay, so now we've installed this and we can go ahead to test this. So let's test this from here. Yes, so you said we cannot use the import statement inside the Node repo. Yeah, of course. So what we're expected to use is, the const v4 import require UUID, right? So now we can just call v4, of course, console.log. So the reason why you see this is different from what we did initially is because right now we are calling the exact method found in here. Of course, this is basically also, this can be called, destruct. I think it's called destructure. And this is pretty much what you do on a lot of libraries, except for some libraries that have some specific, usage patterns, which of course will be described as well. So definitely you're going to have like, an explainer here on how to use any library. And even if the explainer here, maybe they don't show you like some sample codes, they might give you a link to their GitHub repo where you can find like, some description about what this library should do, right? So if you scroll down to the README, you'll see a couple of descriptions, how to use them, how it's expected to work. And so that should not be a big deal. Always ensure you check this out. If you're not on GitHub, ensure you sign up on GitHub already. It's actually very important that you sign up on GitHub. Okay, so that is it about installing simple libraries. Let's just go ahead and talk about the reason why we installed Node. Of course, I said it already, but I think some people joined the call late, I believe. So the major, because we don't want to run this JavaScript code base on our browsers, right? And of course, we are doing basically everything for now right inside the terminal. So let's look at our slide. Yeah, so talking about, I'm pretty much going to talk, right? Not really code, things around here. It's going to be time consuming, but if I see any reason to probably show you some examples, especially when we get to like, the conditional statements, the control flow and all that, I might just give you like a couple of basic examples on how I think things should work around here. First off, JavaScript basics, right? Variables and scopes. Okay, so when talking about variable naming, I'm going to just give you like pretty much a rundown on what I think are best practices on naming your variables, right? So let's quickly open up Sublime. So I'm going to first quit our repo by pressing Ctrl+C twice or Ctrl+D, all right? Or you can just type exit. So I'm going to clear this for now. And then I'm currently on the desktop, right? So I'm going to create a directory. I'm going to call this revision. So I'm going to move into that directory, and then I'm going to open, first create a file, right? Touch index.js, and then I'm going to open this folder inside Sublime text. also increase the font size so you can see it very well. Good. So for naming your JavaScript, values or objects. Basically, one thing you have to always, consider is coming up with meaningful names that, of course, other developers would, look at your code and understand. So let's be fast. Let's do some examples. So having something like this is definitely wrong. It's definitely wrong because you don't start a variable name with a number. So I'm going to call this John Doe. So you don't start a variable name with a number. You can start with an alphabet, whether it's a capital case or lowercase, whether it's uppercase or lowercase. You can also start with an underscore, and then you can proceed. And don't just call things A, don't just call things B, except you're doing some tests. It's good to have a good name. So this is someone's name. So this can be full name, right? So you can have full name. Of course, everything lowercase is good, but you can also have everything like uppercase, right? Full name. This is also valid. But I'm going to tell you why you should at least follow like industry standards. So this is also valid. Is also valid. Also valid. Okay, so looking at this is just like a bunch of ways to name your variables, different pattern, just appending different things there. Underscore, as a matter of fact, can be at the end. I've seen a couple of libraries, always using underscore at the end. Yeah. So, but this is just a bunch of examples. So there are multiple ways you can name your variables, and why am I showing you this? We need to first understand when you are in a new space, like maybe using JavaScript or using Python or using any language at all. You need to understand that, of course, we already have a community, right? We have like thousands or millions of developers using this particular language. So why should I use like this case, this pattern, when we have a bunch of developers that definitely do not understand or they are not used to this pattern? So in the JavaScript space, we pretty much use a lot of camel case, unlike what we have in Python, where you see in Python they do a lot of full name, which is snake case. And so now what I'm just trying to make you understand is that it depends on the industry, right? This is what you might see in a bunch of Python code base. Here is what you will see in a bunch of JavaScript code base. So of course, even though these these patterns are correct, I think most times you find yourself using uppercase if this happens to be a constant. And of course, a constant is something that you have no plans to really alter or change. So maybe you use constants when it comes to working with probably API keys, right? API keys. Yeah, so I think this is pretty much awesome. Or maybe you have, like something like a specific time, right? So which means a time that is not meant to change. And yeah, I'll just say time, time factor. So maybe something that is meant to remain static, right? So that's when you use constant. You use let or var when you want to declare variables. So back to talking about okay, while I open this down, let's see. Okay, so back to where is Sublime? Okay, good. Okay, so back to talking about why you should think of what is the best option between using the let keyword and also the var keyword. So basically, you can use them interchangeably for some specific use cases. But at the end of the day, they are both used for variable declaration, of course, especially in JavaScript. I know there are some languages that use let. Let is kind of like popular among other languages, but in JavaScript, let and var is used for declaring your variables. So the major difference, I think, when it comes to using var is actually scoped inside functions, and let is scoped inside blocks, right? So var, I think I'll give you an example, but so we have like this can be referred to as a block, right? I'm just going to create a simple function here. So remember, we are talking about var and let right now. Let me take this off. Okay, so we have like maybe like a function function generates a URL, for example, and then maybe we have like current URL and yeah, just the current URL. So probably you're going to call generate URL with a URL, right? Yeah, so generate new URL, that's a good idea. Okay, so let's change this as well. So maybe you have like let, right? And yeah, then let's say you have let new URL, sorry, let new URL was current. It's just an assumption. Then maybe you also have something like maybe you have like another function you're trying to call. So let's say we have another function here, which is basically check URL for errors, and then you pass in like a URL. Then you have maybe return true. So we can say if URL if valid, maybe. So which means we'll have like another function, right? Validating this item. So this is how we use functions to build up, a couple of things. But let's say you're not talking about the functions. Let's just say if URL return true, right? So some people might love to put this in the brackets. I don't see that as being compulsory. Else return false. And as a matter of fact, when you have just one line of JavaScript code after the if statement, this is not always necessary, right? But this is just like a pseudocode, just trying to show you something. Huh? Okay, so now we are trying to call this check for errors, and then maybe I do something like this. So let's assume it's kind of like an async function. I'm sure we've not done async, but the point I'm trying to make here is, when you use like an async function, you can actually, create what we call promises, right? So I'm thinking if maybe there's another thing I can use to show you this without probably using async. Yeah, I think the other option is a callback, but I think that's even kind of worse, right? So let's just stick to async. So imagine we have an async function, and then we are doing something like, return awaits, maybe some other things. Of course, you can't just await, true, but let's just assume we're returning something. I'm changing this to true and false with small case. I was using capital case because basically, I think capital case, you have to use a capital case in Python, and that was a mistake. So, return true, return false. Of course, this is returning a Boolean value, but if you want to, return like a string of true, then you have to do something like this. So, well, let's just stick to this, right? So we have this function that is going to give us either true or false, depending on if we pass a URL. If we don't pass a URL, of course, we're definitely going to get false. So for now, we just want to pass like a simple URL, which is our current value here, right? And then we're going to do something like .then. Of course, this also has to be like in an async function. So do .then, and now async is just a way to tell this function that you are about to perform some kind of concurrency, some kind of concurrency or some kind of concurrent implementation here. But that's not a big deal. We're definitely going to talk about that. I think we also have it on our like promises, right? So check URL for errors, and we have like .then data, and we have something like this. So what we're just doing here is we're trying to like console, right? .log data. Okay, so what we're just doing here is basically we're checking for errors, and at the end of the day, we get our return statement from here. You understand? So and yeah, so the reason why we are doing this, so I can have like my await here. So the reason why we are doing this is because I'm just trying to show you the difference between using this let and having var. So if I put in maybe like var here, this var would also affect generally the entire scope. If I use let is going to basically remain in here in terms of like the scope, right? So everything also boils down to your scoping. Of course, if you also have like, let on top here, you have extended the scope to some other functions, which means this particular item can also access this guy and, do something with it, right? So that's the point, right? It's all about the scope. And var is actually block based in terms of like the scoping is block based, while let is function is basically um, um, sorry, that was a mistake. Sorry, I think I actually switched that. The let itself is actually block based in terms of the scope, right? While the var is actually function scope. So I think I missed that up. Sorry about that. Let me drop. So if we have like this, so var a equals let's say 10, and then we have let. So this is actually function scopes, right? And this is log scopes. So just an example. Also, you can check this out. Oh, sorry. I was about to drop this on the chat. So yeah. Okay, so of course we didn't test this code base, which means we might have like a bug somewhere around here, but just try to understand what we're talking about the functionality, and definitely we're going to write have a sample base to test at the end of this whole explanation. Okay, so that's it for your variables, your scope. Then data types, of course, we have different types of data, string, numbers, boolean. Undefined is also regarded as a JavaScript data. Null, a symbol, big int, array, object. Now, basically, I won't even consider this as an option to explain to you at this point. I think I would focus more on array, object, right? String, number, boolean, right? Undefined is basically when something is not defined. Then null is when something is defined, but of course it has a null value. Okay, so these are the types. I'm just going to see if I can copy this into so this is what we have. I have to be a little bit faster. Okay, so these are the data types. I'm just going to use. Okay, so for the string, let's do this. So we have like let name equals John. String. Let salary. Let let Okay, so what you need to understand is if you have like an empty space, this is no longer on the null, right? This is no longer null. So sometimes this might be a little bit conflicting or challenging because, from my explanation, you might actually feel like once you have an empty space, it's null, no. You have to test this out and you have to, pretty much, get your response. You can, of course, test this from your repo as we are currently on this session even. So talking about array, so let's say roots, right? So let's say pets. I don't think I will be able to talk about. So let's say pets. We have like cat. We have like dog, right? We have like I don't know if some people consider snake to be a pet, but let me take that. So this is just a simple array. Of course, we have a lot of operations from integer operations, string operations, boolean operations, array operations. String operations like trying to get things like uppercase, things like lowercase. So I'm just going to do string operations in JS, right? So this is basically how you search for all these things. You can of course check like W3. I'm not going to open this, but basically you can do things like trim. You can do things like slice. You can do things like substring. So these are some of the items I'm picking from here. There are more, right? So maybe I should send this to you. We have more of these. So Let me drop it in the chat as well. Okay. All right. So we're just going to like play around with a couple of them, right? Yeah, let's go back to Sublime. So we can have like, let's assume we have like name or like John Doe, and let's say console dot log name dot substring. I think name dot substring basically requires yeah, I guess. So I don't know if there's this right now. Let's see what we have. The name of this file is index, of course. So I'm just going to do node index.js. And then, so John Doe. So we get back John Doe. And I think basically it's because we're trying to check, yeah, name.substring John. Let's see something here. Let's try name.stream. So you always need to like, use some of these references, of course. I don't expect you to, like try to cram a lot of these things. It's good to know them. It's good to know them. It's good to remember some of them. So you see, we have length. Length does not require this, function call like the open and close braces. So let's give that a trial and see. We have length. Console.log. Back to our terminal. Let's see what we have. It's okay. All right. So that is just basically a simple example. But of course, you can check out a lot of them. Slides. You have like basically you have to put in two parameters, start and end. So I think this is also the reason why we did not get that correctly. It has to be like a start and end value, right, to get a substring. So probably we can have like name.substring. So probably we can maybe do like J and the H, right? So let's see what we get from here. We said J and H. So my expectation was to probably get O probably, but that did not work out. So I think maybe this is slice. So let's see JavaScript substring, and basically it's supposed to be used to extract portions of yeah, trying this again. Okay, so probably it's working with the index, right? So this is working with like the index from 0 to 5, from 0 to 4, probably giving me come on, the same thing. I wonder why. Yeah, let's do okay. So probably the 5 was the empty space. Okay, so this works, right? 0 to 1, and we just have the J. So please go ahead and check this out, and know when to use some of them. Yeah, you have to do a lot of googling. That is actually very correct. This is for slicing, substring slicing. Just check a lot of them. How to search through a string. You see, we also have numbers. So just make sure you go through that link, okay? So that's it for strings. For numbers, for Boolean is basically the true or false. So you can also have a function returning true or false. Just have that at the back of your mind. When you are creating functions that returns true or false, most of your functions might end up being what we call pure functions. So pure functions are just functions that return that has no side effects. So no side effects. And when they say something does not have side effects, it means it performs no other operation than the specific operation that it was actually meant to perform. Then, of course, the on the other way around, we have like the impure functions, which definitely does like a whole bunch of things. It's not a bad idea, but it's not actually like some of the best practices with regards to coding pattern. Okay, so that's it for data types, and we also have the primitive and reference types. We have the control flow. Yeah, you can read this up, so we won't spend much time on that. Ensure you read this up, and I'm very sure that Mr. Elijah must have covered this already. But basically, that is just describing the types of data that we have in terms of like talking about byte, short, int, and most of these items also fall under numbers, right? Whether you have byte, short, int, long, float, double, boolean, yeah, double. Everything here also falls on that number. A number is just like a general description of these items. Then we have the boolean, we have the character. Some of them are primitive, and some of them actually, work with reference types. Basically, when you start talking about objects and some others. So please ensure you check it out from your end. Control flow statements, of course, using for loops, while loops, and for example, we had an array, and we can just use like the for loop to loop through our array. That's actually a control flow statement. Of course, trying to give us like a general flow or a general direction of our code base. So we can be performing a lot of things within the same for loop, right? So we can say for I in, oh, this is kind of look like Python code already again. Sorry about that. So we can say for each, yeah, let's see. I think we should have for each, right? Am I making this mistake? For each I in pets, trying to make sure this is, um, oh, not Python again. Um, console log. Let's see if I am, very wrong. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, this is just like the for each statement, but of course it can be like the for I, and you have like a comma, so you can have like for um, yeah, for let I, then you can say I is less than pets dot length, right? Um, length. Then you have I think this is what we need. Let's try this and see I plus plus, and we have like print I. Oh, sorry, console. Yeah, so I did a lot of Python training today, and I think that's why we're having this issue. So the for each statement is also like faster and better, but I'm going to give you for each JS. I'm very sure, of course, it's quite simple. Um, Array for each method. So let's see the mistake I actually made earlier. So this is what the syntax, of course, would look like. You have like the for each. You can pass in a function, and okay, so you can actually pass in a function, and yeah, you can check this out. So we said for each fruits dot for each. So let's see if we can also do pets dot for each I, right? Then console.log I. So we're going to verify this once again. Let's see where the problem is coming from. We said unexpected token. Um, yeah, so why do we have this? Come back here again to verify this. Where am I making that mistake from? Um, fruits dot for each. And inside our function, what do we have there? Let's see. Mhm. Okay, okay. This looks quite different, but I mean, this is JavaScript syntax, of course, so you have to make sure you're following the pattern here. So basically, what I see that was done here, passed in a generic function, passing a function in here, and we have numbers that for each, which means this item is going to grab every single number one after the other, and it's going to pass in this number into the item. So when you say sum plus equal to items, what is going to happen here is you're going to be adding values to sum by default. JavaScript is to probably pass a function, and maybe that's the problem we're having here. You're expected to on our because we have the while loop. Ensure you check them out. You have the while loop. You have the yeah. So basically, I think some of the major items you use for looping is basically your while loop, your for loops, right? And also for each. For each is kind of like special to languages like Python and JS. I don't think I've seen that in some other languages, but it's quite good as well. Then you have your conditional statement, which of course is the if statement, just like what we did previously in the other code base. Then you have your functions and your types. So of course, we've already created a couple of functions, using this as an example. So function hello, right? Yeah, as an example, you can also have a let hello equals some other function, also known as the arrow function. And yeah, you can actually have a function inside your object. So maybe we'll have let user equals. So this is more like regarded as a method, of course, like get user. This is more like a method, right? So there are a couple of ways to declare functions in JavaScript even more, but that is just some of the options we have. Object-oriented JavaScript, we discussed about how you create your class, how you create your class, how you put in your constructor, right, and how you also put in your attributes. And of course, remember to check the version of Node you are using, because when you are working with constructors, sometimes it might not work if you're on a lower version of Node. It might not really work with the direct class implementation. So maybe we'll have like employee, and we have this, and then you have like a constructor. Spell that correctly. And then maybe you decide to put in like some of your items here, name, ID, and you say you have name, ID, and then you say you have this that name equals name, right? And then use that ID equals ID. As a matter of fact, you can also do your ID generation here automatically by, of course, importing const v4 equals require UID, right? So you can do something like this, and anytime you create a new instance of this, which is employee, let's employee one equals new employee. So once you pass in this, for example, once you pass in this is our constructor, right? So we don't need to pass in the ID. The ID is actually going to kind of like be generated. But once you pass in this, if you want to pass in the ID, then of course you can pass in your ID here all by yourself, and then you have your ID and your ID. So this is basically OOP, and you can do like inheritance. Maybe every employee is going to inherit from like a class of person. Come on. So a class of person, and you have like the person details. So let's assume this is going to be like employee ID, right? We also have like department. I can't spell department. Okay. So department. So you have like department, employee ID, right? So we have like a person, name, phone number, right? Email. Okay, so these are not necessarily compulsory. I'm just putting that in there. And we have like another constructor, and we have like the name, phone number, and the email, right? And we have like this dot name equals name, and this dot phone number equals phone number, and this dot email equals email, right? And then what we can do in order to extend this is just to say extends person, and extend person. Okay, so now we are able to like inherit from here, which means you have to definitely call the super, and pass in like the name, the phone number, and also the email. And of course, we pass it in there, and we also need to pass it here: name, phone number, and email. Right. So you extend this set of items, of course, from the super, and then you pass in the rest, which is what we have here. So this can sit here. It can still sit at the bottom. It's fine. It's cool. You can have your methods in here, like maybe get name. So you can also use a getter, right? But for now, we're just using like a direct method. So we can say return this dot name, right? So you can have multiple methods here. And the idea is every class that inherited from this would be able to access the methods in person. But the reason for doing this level of inheritance is you have like a good abstraction level where you put in some of the default things that everyone should be able to do here, and then when you get here, maybe some of the specific things that only employees should do. Then at the end of the day, you can also have some activities that only administrators should do. But of course, an administrator is also a person, right? So an admin is also a person. And then maybe here you say an employee can, when an employee comes to work in the morning, they need to check in, right? So they need to check in. And when they're checking in, some things are probably required. Maybe some things are probably required. They need to pass in some items, maybe like their ID, or I don't know. It depends on the implementation, right? Then here we can just say return checked in. Just as a very simple example. When it comes to the admin, so of course maybe you have given the admin the privilege not to even think about checking in, right? So you can just maybe the admin has the privilege to delete employee, and you need to pass in like the employee ID, as a variable. As a parameter, sorry. So these are just, level of, trying to break down your business model into different classes and, putting all your major operations here where you have to probably call your database, and all that. We're definitely going to work on a quick example. But before that, let's also move very fast. So that's it for functions. OOP, promises is what I showed you previously. You have async, function, function, that's correct. Promise example, right? Also, it can even look like this. It can look like, so this is just like one way to do this, right? Return a promise. So you can also have like async. Let's say you have like let A equals async, and then you can have this, right? And then you can have this. This is also valid. Of course, when you have an async, you need to await something. It's not compulsory, but maybe you have something you want to, await. That's why you made this asynchronous in the first place, right? So you have something you want to await. Anyways, that aside, that is for JavaScript promises. There are some other ways to implement promises, such as using callbacks. That is kind of like the old-fashioned way of doing things, but you can check it out. Definitely, you can check it out. Okay. So let's go to the next, which is what we have to do today. I've already shown you how to install. Talking about exploring Node, we're going to just quickly take a look at the documentation and cover a couple of things on the documentation. So let's click on the LTS, which is the long-term support version. So as you can see, you can basically do a lot of things on Node, right? Node gives you like, access to a lot of interfaces from assertion, which is basically used for testing. You just have to check if two values basically, has the same or has a specific item. Maybe you are trying to say, does is A equals to 10, so you can use the assertion library to definitely do all that. So we have a couple of methods, deep equal, trying to compare several things to see if they are equal in value. You can use the assertion library basically for testing. Basically for testing. It's just like saying is A equals A, right? So you can say you are asserting something is A equals A. You have like assert A, comma A, right? So you can actually do assert strict equals, assert equals. There are lots and loads of functions you can try out from here. When we cover a little bit on testing, you will definitely see us use the assert. There are some other libraries that you can maybe hear other people talking about, like Jest or Mocha, but everything still boils down to assertion, which means those libraries are also using assertion under the hood, and that's something you need to be aware. Most of the frameworks, most of the libraries are implemented to help you because they feel this can be kind of like a little bit cumbersome for you to always understand what they are referring to. But all the functions, if you take your time, you'll definitely understand this, like assert dot does not match. So we're checking if something actually matches with another item. Assert dot does not reject, does not throw equal, right? This is what you'll be using most of the time, checking if a particular message is equal to another message. So let's see if maybe we can come up with something. We can have const, right? Let's see, can we have assert just like this? Probably, let's see if let's just see what we get, right? Require assert, right? And always remember, as I told you earlier, you can just quickly preview this with console.directory just to see what it looks like first. So you see we have a couple of the methods in here. We just printed that in. So probably we can do those equal directly. So we can do console.log dot equal. So let's see. We have 1, just to see if we're going to get true. It tells us undefined, right? So, and I want us to know why. So let's go back to our documentation. I think I have to close this. Yeah. Back to our documentation, and let's click on this, right? So by clicking on this, we have assert that equals 1, 1, and we have a couple of values here, and I think it gave us. Let's see. Let's yes. So probably when it's right, you get this undefined. What if it's wrong? Let's see what we get now when it's wrong. Okay, so when it's right, it means it's valid. So probably what you would do for this check is to probably do something like if you have this, nothing should probably happen. Or if not this, then probably console dot sorry, not in a string, console dot log. Or maybe you want to return like some kind of error message when you start doing the APIs, right? So you can actually return something if it's not valid, if it's not equal, right? So this can be an object, this can be a whole function you're passing in, and maybe that function would do some other kind of, checks and expecting some return. So what I mean is right now we're doing 1, right? But we can also go ahead and test this on maybe 2 functions, right? You can say get 1 and get 2. Of course, these are functions. So let's see what we get. Remember that the functions in this case has to be a pure function returning the value, right? So function get 1, function get 2, return 1, right? Return 1. And yeah, so let's see if we probably call this ROES. Not necessary anyways. So we'll do this and we'll get undefined, meaning is sort of valid. And now we change the value to maybe like 2, and we expect us to see a couple of error telling us there's an assertion error. And this is actually like a throw syntax. It threw up this error, right? And the error is an assertion error. So which means we can also go ahead to do, if there's an assertion error, then probably do some other things, right? Using conditionals. So that is it for assertion. And there are a lot of other libraries. The documentation might look a little bit difficult to read, but trust me, it's not as difficult as you think. Most of the items you'll be using here, you have to go down to maybe like OS. So if you have used a bunch of applications built with Electron, probably, if you know what Electron is, or some other JavaScript libraries, they can actually use Node to come down to the operating system level. By default, JavaScript does not really get down to the operating system level. So what happens here is there's a bunch of C++ bindings to JavaScript that would aid you get some of these details, right? So this is a very detailed class, as you can see, trying to make sure you understand some of these core concepts and why they work the way they work. So that by the time you start exploring Node, you won't find it difficult, to do things, or you would always try to recall some of these things. So for example, we can just use our repo in this case. So let's just go to Node. In our repo, we can actually do const OS equals require OS, right? To require our OS module. And now we can say so I think we can also just do os.a. Okay, yeah. So now you're seeing we're able to get our current operating system. I think it's called the architecture, or maybe you can also call it the archetype. Now we can also do OS.constant, OS.CPUs to show us the type of the amount of CPUs that we have, and it gives you like a lot of details. So probably I would love to put this in a table, right? Console.table, so we can actually visualize this properly. And now you see we have this table, right? So it's telling us, okay, we're using Intel Core i5 with this spec. So this is, basically the amount of CPUs we have running and the exact spec. Okay, so that's for CPUs. And of course, you use this kind of things to visualize maybe the application you are building. Maybe there's an API call to say, get the number of CPUs. You do this and you return the number of CPUs to the Electron front end, and you display this to the user. So basically, you can also get your home directory or your host name, right? So if you do dot host name, let's see what we get, lucifer.local. If we do dot release, it gives us like, our release, which is 21.2.0. If we go ahead and also check here about this Mac, just to verify what we have, you see our processor description was right. You can also check your memory, the RAM, but of course it will show you the RAM as bytes. Yeah, bytes or bits. Yeah, I think as bits, right? So let's go ahead and also like check that. So you can test these items. Basically, you can just go around and play with them. You can check the amount of free memory you have on your computer, free mem, and it gives you the amount of free memory. You have to convert this, of course, to gigabytes if you want to get the exact value in gigabyte. You can also check your home directory. So you see we're just playing around with these guys, right? And of course, they're all useful. This is our home directory, user/brain. You can check your temporal directory, or you can probably, create a temporal directory as well using that. You can check your OS.version. So you see, this guys, it's good to understand, some of these things. So these are OS version, using the Darwin kernel, of course, on a Mac. The same things, these items would also give you the Windows equivalent, right? So you can, use this, play around with it. This is the OS module, and definitely you're going to, find yourself using this for, especially when you work on like desktop related solutions, right? Maybe like something like something like VS Code, something like even Discord. I think these items were built with Electron, of course, which means there's a lot of Node.js working on the background. So you see, we have parts, right? We have parts, we have processes, policies, and of course, the major thing at the end of the day is, calling most of these methods, because that is, what JavaScript is. Of course, everything are just a bunch of objects. Also, when it comes to working with, file systems, so you see, using the parts, you can check base name, you can actually, this is right, you can actually try to format like a part, or check the format of the part. You can join parts, you can pass the part, you can resolve the part. So there are basically a lot of operations, and it's also as simple as, calling it this way. You have to use const part equals require, or if you're using the latest ES6, you can also use the import statement to import this library or this module. So at this point in time, this is actually, you can check out a lot of sample code from here. This is more like using the process. I think this should be like a process, right? This is OS. Let's see, where is the process? Who is that? Okay, so of course you see crypto. Crypto is basically for cryptography, right? Encryption, decryption, and all that. That's what you get from the crypto. So when we start working on code base and you see us using some of these things, you have to realize that we are probably picking it from here, or the ones that we cannot find here, we definitely get them from npm, right? Of course, since it won't be enough to we don't have enough time to really explain every single API. This is actually referred to as the Nodejs Api on this specific version, and of course API has functionalities or methods that you can definitely call, right? So Yeah, you can definitely play around with some of these things, especially the OS part and the processes. So when it comes to using processes, we are definitely going to use it for one of our projects right now. I'm just going to show you like a quick example on what you can do with the process, right? So let us see what we can implement by using the Node.js process. Probably we should start with the FS, right? The FS describes the file system. So let's start with the FS. I think that's basically what we are supposed to do first. And then I'll use process for talking about the command line arguments. All right. So for the file system, let's try to read values from a file. So let's just assume that we have like let fs equals require fs, right? So let's just see console.log or console.jar. So I'm just doing this, to show you how to scan through your. Yeah, we have to exit this first. So exit, right? So just to show you how to scan through modules, so you don't start asking yourself questions or running down to Google or Stack Overflow all the time. You can just run this, and it gives you like a lot of the things you can use, like append file sync, chown sync, and basically chown and ch mode is for assigning permissions and groupings to probably directories or files, right? Trying to, I think the full meaning. Oh my god, I can't remember. You can check it out. I think CH might be change mode and change ownership, right? Change ownership and change mode. I'm not so certain. Please check it out. Well, I think it should be okay. Yeah, so you can also close a file. So there are a bunch of things we can do here. Basically, we're trying to read a file. So of course, you can open a file. You can open a file asynchronously. By default, it's asynchronous. Um, let's see if we can read a file, right? Using read file. Okay, so let's use the read file. So I'm going to say fs.read file. We have not created a file, so let me just do, inside this directory, I'm going to create a touch index .txt, or let's say later.txt, and I'm going to write, so I'm going to use vim, so vi later.txt, and then I'm just going to do like, yeah, so this is a letter to my friend. Okay, so now that we have this, let's save this. So I'm just going to do WQ, of course. Come on. What's wrong with you? Okay, so we write this and we quit Vim, and now we have that file, of course. So I can just come here and definitely call that file, which is later, right? The txt, and yeah, we can just put in like our function, which is of course our callback, and yeah, we check if we have an error, and we can say probably value. Okay, this worked. Then we can do console.log the value dot to string, right? So we're just trying to ensure that we bring out a string at the end of the day. Let's test this and see what we have. So this is the result, my friend. Awesome. So we're able to read that file, all right? Oh, no, that was not what you did. So we have to do node index, right? So let's see. Okay, so we have an error, and our error is just at this point. So let's see where that error is coming from. Let's see. We have a value. I think basically this is ought to be like a buffer, but I expect this to also work properly. Function. Okay, perfect. So yeah, so this is a letter to my friend. Okay, perfect. Okay, so the problem was it was a spelling error for the function. So of course we need to really understand this code. That the first thing we did here was import the file system module, right? And that's what we did here. The second thing we did here is this is directly using a callback function, but of course you can have a function to do this. So we can just say read file function. Another mistake, and we have like yeah. So having this, we're actually reading this file. We can choose to probably return this, right? I love working with functions anyways. Then in here, we can, console.log the function to read the file. We can also decide to abstract this item by probably calling this file name, right? And in here, we can just, put in this item file name. And, when we say read file, we can then pass in like file name. So let's go ahead and test this and see. So we have file name as an error, and yeah, it said it's not defined, and of course that is correct. Variable naming error. Now we still get undefined. So let's try to figure out why this is undefined, right? So what we have here, we are reading a specific file. I'm going to do something first. I'm going to console.log um, uh, the value, right? The string, just to figure out why this did not work. And I'm actually telling myself it's because of the event loop thing that we discussed earlier. Um, oh yeah, so it works now. That's because I logged this in here. But I discovered, trying to return this, maybe, just maybe, this should be like let's f equals this, and we return f. Let's see what have we returned here. Read file, this. Yeah, we are actually meant to, of course, return it in here. So we don't need to do this outside. That's quite strange. Why we did not get that to work? So which is the value, right? And then at the end of the day, we probably return f outside here. So let's see. Okay. So that works. Verify. Let's see. Is this still undefined? It's still undefined. So let's try to figure this out. We have our console, right? We have our console.log. Okay, so if we return this item in here, what do we get? So this is just a little bit of debugging and just to see if we still have our console.log F, right? So do we have our F coming out of this place? Definitely, we do not have our F coming out of this point here. So I think maybe we have to, yeah, probably, not so sure. With that, still the same thing. Okay, so I think this is the point where we have to now start thinking of trying to make this like, a synchronous function. We're definitely going to test that. And probably because we are, passing this whole item pretty much fast before it tries to, wrap this up and return it. But if it's console.log, the evaluation seems to be, very fast. And I think it's just, well, I think it's just kind of like an execution error, trying to, let's see, results. And here at this point, um, we say results equals value of the string. So just want to test something here, console.log results, and let's see what happens in there. So that works. Okay. So if that works, I should be able to. So I should be able to probably. I see why we are having this specific error right now. I remember that as I said when we talk about the event loop, uh, the JavaScript is basically not going to wait for this guy, except to choose to await this entire item, and then probably let's see if awaiting this item would make us would make this work, right? If awaiting this item will make this work. So if we return result here and then we test it, then we decide to console.log this item here. Let's see what we have. So now we have a promise, right? Then now we can have the then D, and we have probably console. So now we're not supposed to put this in here. It doesn't make much sense again, but let me take it out, right? And we have we have this. console, right, console.log d value there, and let's see what we have now. So we still have uh, undefined. We still have undefined. We need to know why we have undefined. So even if this is a promise, this is a valid promise, we still have undefined. So I think I would definitely, advise, running this. I will use the synchronous, way of, running this. Yeah, definitely, we're going to fix that, and I would also, like figure out how to get this to work. But I think it's actually specific to the fact that we're using a callback function here. Not a big deal. Definitely something we're going to figure out, okay? Okay, so back to this. Instead of wasting too much time here, we've spent a lot of time already. So we have the console.log value to string. And yeah, so we're able to read that file. And of course, we can also like, write to a file using the file system module. You can also write to a file. I think we're going to also like, give this writing to a file trial. So now we have fs and we have maybe var text equals the new file contents. And we have fs.write file. So the name of our file, I remember, is letter. So let's see if we can override the content we have there, and then we just call like the data. Of course, we're still using the callback pattern, right? So we have like the if error. If there's an error, just tell us there's an error. Console.log. Yeah, same thing. If there's an error, console.log error. If there's no error, just go ahead and console.log successfully wrote text to file, right? So let's see if I just run this file, and let's see. So it said data is not defined. Yeah, I think this is oh yeah. So this should be text, right? So that data. Oh, okay. So let's go ahead and check nano later. So let's see. So we have new file content. Oh yeah, so that was able to override the whole thing. There are ways to actually, append items to documents, or probably just yeah, you can append. What we did now actually took off the entire content, right? So you can actually append. This is the new copy. This is the new copy. So there are some arguments you pass in here. You can definitely append, an item without overwriting the previous item. Just so you know, definitely that's very much possible. I think I first need to run this file, right? Then I need to open it up again, and now we see the new copy. Okay, so this is like using pure Node file system to implement this. Yeah. Okay, so let's see what we have. Let's see what we have. I think we still have like 4 minutes to. Okay, we still have 4 minutes to say some one or two things about the file system. So let's go back to the Node documentation, right? Yeah, let's go back to the documentation. Let's go back to. Let's see. So go back to file system. And yes, you can actually explore more options here. So you can append a file. You can create write stream, read write stream. So working with stream is actually more like it's more like trying to read what we call a stream of data that is kind of like continuous. Maybe you see like you're trying to play a video on YouTube. YouTube keeps bringing in data continuously, even though you are playing that data. You can definitely use a stream. So you pass in the entire data into a stream, and then you read or write to that particular stream that you've created. You can open a directory, you can open a file, so you can check if a file exists as well using some of these commands here. You can link or unlink files. Just in case you don't understand, coming down here and clicking on any of these items will give you like an explanation of what this is. And this is the best way to Node, to understand what these methods do. Even though you don't use them for a very long time, at least you understand what they do. And there's sample code base that you can definitely try, right? So you can just copy and test just to make sure it works. And if you don't understand the code base, then you can paste it in there, and we'll try to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about async very well because I think we have to cover async in a complete class. There are lots of details to when working with async. Okay, so I think the next thing we need to talk about is the process, right? I think it's okay. So I think it's the JavaScript, the Node.js process. So let's try to implement a simple JS file. Maybe you need this. I don't know. Let me also go back to the previous example why I paste this for you. Okay, so the previous example, to just read the contents. Okay, so I think this is what we basically need. Right. Function around this. Okay. Okay, so yeah, let's just talk about process. So what can we actually do when it comes to talking about working with command line? There are so many other libraries that make it much easier, but now we are still focusing on core Node. So let's see what we can do by trying to use the repo for a start. So we come into Node and we try to do something like just to see if maybe we have something called a process before we go back to our Sublime text. So let's see, we can have probably like process. I'll just need to verify if there's anything like this, and we'll say there console.process. So just to see what we have, and of course, we have a whole bunch of oh my god, this is basically a lot. Yeah, so you can check it out. This is actually a lot, right? So let's go back to our text editor. Let's start by saying console.log, and we have like a the arguments. Basically, to get all the arguments to pass in, that is what you do. I'm going to exit out of yeah. So now I'm going to call the file. I'm going to add a. Let's see. So you see, we're able to get the processes, right? We're able to get the arguments, sorry. So it's telling us, okay, this is what we called, and these are the arguments that were passed, right? So we called node index, and of course, it's telling us we called node index.js, right? That's the file, and also the arguments we pass. Let's pass in something more meaningful. Let's say color black. So now we have color black, and we're able to pass color black. So one thing we can also do is to probably one thing we can also do is to probably slice off some, items. We can slice off. We can say maybe we want to slice off this item and get the rest item probably in the array. So we can slice off these two items by doing, of course, from our code base here. So we can say to slice, and we're slicing off two items. Let's see. The first item should be able to take off. Let's see what we have, right? So yeah, it was able to take off the first item. So if we make it 2, we'll be able to take off 2 items, and we have our yeah. So this is very good, right? And how do we access these 2 items that we have, at this moment? Of course, everything is going to definitely be passed in as we can pass this in as let's say let arguments. And then we can say arguments. So just to test, right? So let's do console.log argument 1. The expectation is to see the first argument black, right? And argument 0 will give us color. So imagine if we want to run this stuff to set a certain color to black, right? We're saying this is the property color black. So maybe because we have an object we need to send somewhere, and then obj equals let obj, and we have like color by default maybe is white, so using this you can grab the first item which is the color, um, right? You can grab the first item which is the color, and then you can just console.table, and you have like obj, and let's say you have this is color and this is website name maybe, and then we grab we say argument 1, right? So we can do yeah, so definitely we can do color black, and yeah, so the argument definitely is not going to be 1, rather, because what we are trying to do is to set color, let's say black, and the website name should be like maybe my website, right? And of course, let's see if we can do, let's try this first. My website without a space. Let's see what we have. We did a console.table. This is what we have. So if we also put this, let's test if this is valid. Let's see, my website with the space. Awesome. So as you can see, we can grab these arguments using a process dot argv. So in order to make this more interesting, we can just try to build a very simple, a very simple app. So let's just do this right now. So we're going to do constants. So let's pass this in as a constant argument again. Yeah, I think I should have just left that. Yeah, so we just have this. We slice off the first 2 items, of course, which is the node and the name of the file. We're taking that off, and then we just want to use a simple switch statement. Okay, so switch statement in JavaScript. Yeah, okay. So we want to grab the first keyword from this, the first value from this argument. So we do argument, and we take the first value, and we are going to say with some cases, if this first value is color, console.log, the argument, and we'll take the response, which is this is a color, right? So that's what we want to do, is a color, and we also we always have to break, right? We always have to break. Yeah, so I think this is great, and of course, let's just put some level of spacing there. So we have another case. If it's website name, then we say is our website name. Okay, so that is not a good spelling. So let's just work with 2. And let's just set a default console.log can't find matching case to your arguments. Okay, so I'm going to show you like a good use case of when you start doing things like this. We have an example that was implemented. Of course, in form of a bot on our server right now. We have an example. I'm going to show you how I managed to grab the text that people put in. Just to make sure. So I'll show you an example, but of course, it's not in production, it's still under testing, and if you play around with it too much, it might crash. So I'll just show you. So for this, let's go ahead and run this program, and we are going to pass in color, right? I will do black. So we run this, and we're supposed to get not this, we're supposed to get 1, which is to tell us black is a color, or maybe the website. Okay, so now we have black is a color, right? So we change this to even red. Red is a color, right? So if we also do this for the website, we pass website name here instead, and then we do top universe. So of course we get top universe as our website name, and that is how you work with processes. And I think finally we just have 10 minutes. I also need questions from you. Finally, this is what I was referring to. how we use arguments to make this look fun. So of course, I can see we just have like two guys left on the call. Um, so using arguments, we're able to like collect some level of detail. So for example, right here in the room, I can just write this, and we have a bot. Okay, so I think probably our bot is not functional within these rooms. So I'm going to delete this, but I'm going to show you what I mean. It's not yet activated to work in that specific room. So let's come down to our testing environment. If you can see my screen. So using processes, I can drop this and we have a response from our bot. So our bot is actually collecting these arguments, as you can see. And I hope you can see my screen, though it's not that clear, but our bot is able to respond to our text here. So I think Moses is typing. So, but anyways, we can also try, some other things like maybe wisdom, and you see our bot is able to give us um, some word of inspiration. How is your Discord working? Okay. All right. So I think that is it. That should be all for this session. I strongly believe you understood some of these things. If you have any question, go ahead and drop your question here on the chat. But that should be all for now. And yeah, we were supposed to work on a very simple URL shortener app, but this is going to be a workshop section for another class, and we'll definitely schedule a class with you to build this using what we've learned so far about processes and also about Node.js and JavaScript so far. So thank you very much for being part of this session, and do have a great night. Yeah, bye.